After 3 years of working overseas, I, Catherine Brooks, had finally saved enough money to settle back in New York permanently at the age of 28. As the airplane descended toward JFK Airport, I was eager to surprise my parents with an unexpected homecoming. I fumbled with my keys for what felt like an eternity, only to discover that the lock had been changed entirely. When the door finally opened, I found myself face to face with my cousin Vanessa, draped in my silk pajamas and clearly using my limited edition skincare products. She raised an eyebrow and looked me up and down with casual disdain before asking, "My mother already transferred this apartment to my name. Who exactly are you?" I smiled calmly and pulled out my phone to make 3 strategic calls. The first was to my attorney. "I need to reclaim my apartment immediately, right now, this instant." The second was to ABC News. "I have compelling news material about illegal property occupation that would make for excellent coverage." The third call I put on speaker and dialed the New York Police Department. "Captain Murphy, there is a property dispute in your jurisdiction that requires immediate attention and resolution." I keep replaying this in my head, how it could happen to literally anyone, anywhere. Tell me where you're hearing this story from. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. Now, back to what happened. My cousin's expression transformed from smug satisfaction to ghostly pale terror, while Aunt Elizabeth rushed out from the interior of the apartment, clearly intending to silence me through intimidation. I calmly displayed my property deed and said with measured composure, "Do not worry yourselves. Your remarkable adventures are just beginning to unfold." As the airplane touched down that evening, I gazed out the window at this city I had left behind 3 years earlier. The skyline sparkled brilliantly with familiar lights, though several unfamiliar skyscrapers had been added to the landscape during my absence. The airplane window reflected my somewhat weary face, but inside my chest burned a steady flame of determination. Those 3 years had been sufficient time for me to endure countless sleepless nights in London's financial district, conquering complex challenges while accumulating the confidence that comes from no longer needing to depend on anyone else's charity. In my luggage, aside from a few personal belongings, were carefully chosen gifts for my parents. For my father, Frank Brooks, I had brought the limited edition fishing equipment he had always desired, and for my mother, Margaret Brooks, the luxury brand cashmere scarf she had mentioned repeatedly in our conversations. I had deliberately chosen not to notify them of my flight details, wanting to stage a surprise arrival and witness their delighted expressions when they saw me unexpectedly at their door. The taxi navigated through streets that remained as bustling as ever, with light streaming past the windows, outlining a cityscape that felt both familiar and somehow distant. The driver chatted enthusiastically about how much the city had changed over the past few years, mentioning that many places had become unrecognizable. I responded with polite small talk, but my thoughts had already flown ahead to that apartment on the Upper East Side, filled with memories from my entire childhood and youth. Before my departure for London, I had used my first substantial savings from work, combined with some of my parents' accumulated funds, to make the down payment on that apartment. The property deed clearly and unmistakably bore only my name, Catherine Brooks. At the time, I had viewed it as establishing my roots in this city, creating the most secure harbour for weathering any storms that might arise. During those 3 years abroad, my contact with home had been somewhat sporadic. The time difference and my demanding work schedule created an invisible barrier between us. During our video calls, my parents consistently shared only positive news, insisting that everything at home was perfectly fine and urging me not to worry, but instead to take good care of myself. I had occasionally mentioned my possible return to the United States, but they seemed not to take these comments seriously. treating them as casual remarks made during brief work breaks. The taxi came to a stop in front of the apartment building. I pulled my suitcase behind me, walking with light, eager steps toward the entrance. Surprisingly, my access card still functioned perfectly, producing that familiar soft beep as the door unlocked. Everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly. The elevator rose steadily, the numbers climbing to the familiar 12. As I stepped out of the elevator and stood before apartment 12B, my heart, which had remained relatively calm throughout the journey, suddenly began racing uncontrollably. On my keyring, that most familiar key gleamed warmly under the hallway lighting. I took a deep breath, filled with somewhat mischievous anticipation, and inserted the key into the lock. Something was terribly wrong. The smooth turning motion I had expected simply did not occur. The key felt as though it had become stuck against some hard foreign object inside the lock. It would neither turn nor withdraw. I paused for a moment, initially thinking that perhaps the lock mechanism had developed rust from disuse over such an extended period. I attempted the process again, applying gentle pressure and technique, but the key remained completely immovable. The joyful anticipation in my heart quickly cooled, replaced by an indescribable sense that something was fundamentally amiss. I bent down to examine the lock more closely, using my phone's flashlight for illumination. My heart suddenly plummeted as I realized the internal structure of the lock mechanism appeared completely unfamiliar. This was absolutely not the original lock that had been on my apartment door. Who had changed the lock on my home? Why would they do such a thing? Did my parents know about this? Why had no one informed me of this development? Countless questions instantly crowded my mind. An ominous premonition, like icy tidewater, slowly crept up around my ankles. I steadied myself, abandoned my attempts with the key, and instead pressed the doorbell firmly. One ring, then two, and I could hear the sound of shuffling footsteps from within the apartment. The door opened just a crack from the inside with a soft click, revealing a face covered in a green facial mask. Only a pair of carefully applied eyes were visible, scanning me from head to toe. A wave of intensely sweet, cloying perfume scent hit me immediately, completely at odds with the modern minimalist style I had established in my home. "Who are you looking for?" The voice carried a note of irritation at being disturbed, clearly belonging to a young woman. I suppressed the surprise and suspicion rising in my chest, making every effort to keep my voice steady and calm. "Excuse me, is this the residence of Frank Brooks?" Frank Brooks was my father's name. The young woman appeared startled for a moment. Though her expression was difficult to read beneath the facial mask, her eyes clearly showed a flash of wariness and what appeared to be complete unfamiliarity. "Who are you? You must have the wrong apartment," she said while attempting to close the door. Just as the door was about to shut completely, my gaze shot past her and focused intensely on the entryway. On the shoe cabinet, several luxury shopping bags with ostentatious logos were casually scattered, alongside a pair of limited edition designer sneakers in men's sizing that definitely did not match my father's taste or style. Even more jarring was the absence of the hand-woven tapestry I had personally selected and brought back from Nepal, which had been replaced by a cheap, garishly colored printed artwork. My blood rushed to my head with a thunderous roar. "I am Catherine Brooks," I said, staring directly into those eyes, enunciating each word with deliberate clarity. "This is my home." The young woman clearly froze completely. She yanked off the facial mask abruptly, revealing a face that was reasonably attractive, but filled with shock and hostility. This face was familiar to me. She was the daughter of my distant aunt, Elizabeth Foster, known as Vanessa Foster. 3 years had certainly brought changes to her appearance. She was now dressed entirely in designer labels with obvious logos, and traces of cosmetic surgery were faintly visible on her features. "Catherine, cousin." Vanessa's voice rose in pitch with exaggerated disbelief. "What are you doing back here?" Not only did she fail to step aside, but she actually blocked the doorway more firmly with her body, instinctively shielding whatever lay beyond. However, that brief glimpse had been sufficient. The floor leading from the entryway to the living room was covered with a obviously foreign, garish pink long-haired carpet that absolutely did not belong in my home. Why would I not be able to return? I laughed bitterly, attempting to push past her to enter. "This is my home. Move aside." Vanessa reacted like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, suddenly using her entire body weight to brace against the door while her voice became shrill with indignation. "What is wrong with you? This is illegal trespassing. This apartment belongs to me now." The words "belongs to me" struck my eardrums like two bullets fired at point-blank range. At that moment, a slightly overweight, middle-aged woman wearing a silk bathrobe hurried toward us from the direction of the living room. Her voice reached us before she did. "Vanessa, who are you making such a racket with at the door? You have no sense of proper behavior whatsoever." This was unmistakably my aunt, Elizabeth Foster. When Elizabeth saw me, her footsteps halted abruptly. Her face immediately displayed an extremely complex mixture of emotions, including surprise, panic, and what appeared to be forced composure, quickly replaced by her characteristic mean-spirited demeanor. Well, look who we have here. If it is not Catherine, could not make it in London, so you have come crawling back." She approached and positioned herself beside Vanessa. The mother and daughter stood like two guardian statues, completely blocking access to the doorway. Elizabeth crossed her arms and examined me from head to toe, with the kind of gaze reserved for studying failures, curling her lip dismissively. Coming back without giving anyone advance notice, showing up so rashly and impulsively. "Vanessa is living in this apartment now. If you need to discuss something, make an appointment for another day." I noticed she was wearing a bathrobe that looked distinctly familiar. It was the silk garment I had brought back from London for my mother's birthday the previous year. Rage and bitter cold intertwined, shooting up my spine. I forced myself to resist the urge to smash my suitcase directly into them, keeping my voice cold enough to freeze water. "Elizabeth Foster, Vanessa Foster, I am going to say this one final time. Move aside. This is my home, and the property deed clearly states my name, Catherine Brooks, as the owner." Vanessa appeared to be particularly provoked by the mention of property deed. She lifted her chin with an air of ridiculous superiority. "Catherine, stop making unreasonable trouble here. My mother transferred ownership of this apartment to me ages ago. It is now my pre-marital property. Who exactly do you think you are? Some distant relative with no real connection, coming back here expecting to steal property? Transfer of ownership, premarital property. These absurd accusations nearly made me laugh out loud. But laughter would not come, because the mother and daughter duo displayed such righteous indignation and confident assumption of ownership that it seemed unlikely they were performing some poorly crafted theatrical production. Could they actually be serious? Did they genuinely believe that this apartment, which I had worked so hard to purchase, now belonged to Vanessa? Where were my parents? Where were they currently? Why would they have allowed any of this to happen? Countless terrible possibilities flashed through my mind, making my fingertips feel cold. However, I understood clearly that this was not the time for panic or confusion. When dealing with people who possess no moral boundaries whatsoever, rational discussion becomes a waste of breath, while physical confrontation would play directly into their hands. I remained standing in my original position, allowing my gaze to sweep slowly across Elizabeth's face, which despite careful maintenance could not disguise her inherent mean-spirited nature. My eyes then settled on Vanessa's obviously expensive outfit. That nightgown, if my memory served correctly, was the custom silk piece from my closet that I rarely wore because it was too precious to use regularly. The water-like glow remaining on her face from the facial mask she had just removed was clearly the result of using the expensive limited edition skincare products from my vanity table. I suddenly smiled. This was not a happy smile, but rather the kind of smile that emerges when witnessing extremely absurd theatre, carrying with it icy mockery and complete determination. I made no further attempts to force my way inside, nor did I waste another word on them. Under the watchful eyes of Elizabeth and Vanessa, which mixed wariness, smugness, and a barely detectable undercurrent of panic, I calmly retrieved my phone from my coat pocket. I turned off airplane mode, and the signal bars quickly reached full strength. My fingertip touched the cold screen lightly, and I placed the first call to my attorney, putting it on speakerphone. David, this is Catherine. My property at 780 Park Avenue, apartment 12B, is currently being illegally occupied by unknown individuals. Yes, right now, they are inside at this very moment. I need you to immediately contact the NYPD while simultaneously preparing all property ownership documents and initiating the fastest possible eviction procedures. I demand that my lawful possession of the apartment be restored before tonight. From the other end of the phone, my attorney David Chen's professionally calm voice came through the speaker. Understood, Catherine. The property ownership is clear, the procedures are legal, and I will handle this immediately. Please stay in contact. Vanessa's complexion changed slightly, but this was quickly replaced by a kind of brazen attitude of, "What can you possibly do to me?" Elizabeth actually sneered aloud. "Who are you trying to frighten? Finding an attorney? This apartment belongs to our Vanessa now." I ignored their responses completely, lightly touching my fingertip to place the second call, again using the speaker function. "Hello, is this ABC News? I would like to report a story. A particularly egregious case of illegal residential property occupation has occurred on the Upper East Side. The occupiers are displaying an arrogant attitude, claiming the property now belongs to them, and are attempting to expel the lawful property owner. Yes, the current situation on scene would make for very newsworthy content. If you are interested, you could send a reporter immediately." Television station. Elizabeth's face instantly drained of color. She rushed toward me, attempting to grab my phone. "Catherine, what are you doing? Family disputes should not be aired publicly. Do you not understand that?" I easily sidestepped her advance, continuing to speak into the phone. "The address is 780 Park Avenue, apartment 12B. My surname is Brooks." "Very well, I will await your response." After ending that call, clear panic had entered Vanessa's eyes, and she instinctively looked toward her mother for guidance. I did not pause, locating the contact saved as Captain Murphy in my phone directory and placing the call on speaker once again. This time, I slightly moderated my tone while maintaining unmistakable authority. "Captain Murphy, I hope I am not disturbing you. This is Catherine Brooks. Yes, I have just returned from London, and I did not expect to encounter some difficulties immediately. My apartment on Park Avenue has somehow been occupied by my aunt's family. They have changed the locks and claim the house belongs to them now. You oversee this area, correct? While this matter involves family disputes, it constitutes illegal occupation and affects the security image of your jurisdiction. Yes, very well, I will wait here at my front door for a short while. Thank you, Captain." During this phone call, I did not issue any specific instructions, but every word struck precisely at key points. Captain Murphy's voice on the other end immediately became serious. "Catherine, do not worry. I will immediately send officers from the precinct to handle this. This is absolutely unacceptable behavior." 3 phone calls, totaling less than 2 minutes. The hallway fell into deathly silence. Vanessa's face had drained completely of color, her lips trembling as she looked between me and her mother. The arrogant attitude from moments earlier had completely evaporated, leaving only pure terror. Elizabeth appeared even worse, her face ashen grey, pointing at me with shaking hands, stammering for a long time without managing to utter a single coherent word. She probably never could have imagined in her wildest dreams that the niece she had once considered merely somewhat academically accomplished would handle problems in such a direct, brutal, and devastatingly effective manner after 3 years away. Attorney, media, police oversight. 3 lines of approach, like 3 icy shackles, had been quietly secured around their necks before they had fully comprehended what was happening. I had no interest in admiring their changing expressions. Instead, I directly accessed the New York County Property Inquiry System on my phone, entering the address and password for verification. The screen clearly displayed, property owner, Catherine Brooks, ownership status, sole ownership. Registration date, the day I had purchased the apartment. There were no mortgages, liens, or seizures, much less any record of ownership transfer. I turned the screen toward them, my voice neither loud nor soft, but striking the silent air like a hammer. Do you see this clearly? Would you like me to read it aloud for you? Elizabeth appeared to have been completely drained of strength. Her legs gave way and she nearly collapsed to the floor, supported only by Vanessa's desperate grip. I stopped looking at them entirely, pulling my suitcase behind me as I stepped back 2 paces. I leaned against the opposite wall, crossing my arms over my chest, coldly observing this door to the home I had paid for but could not enter. The hallway lighting outlined my clear silhouette while illuminating the pale, desperate faces of Elizabeth and her daughter. From the street below, the city's neon lights continued to flicker, and the faint sound of approaching sirens could be heard in the night sky. I allowed the corners of my mouth to curve upward slightly. The real show was just beginning. Of course, I intended to enter my home. But how I would enter, and who would be forced to leave, would be entirely my decision. Aunt, cousin, I said in a calm voice that carried an unmistakable undercurrent of cold threat. Do not worry, your remarkable life is still ahead of you. The sound of sirens grew from distant to near, and red and blue flashing lights filtered through the hallway windows, casting shifting patterns on the polished walls. Under this police lighting, Elizabeth and Vanessa's faces appeared even more ghastly pale, as if they had encountered spirits. Vanessa gripped Elizabeth's arms so tightly her fingernails nearly pierced the skin, while Elizabeth trembled throughout her entire body, her lips moving soundlessly as if attempting to say something that might salvage the situation, yet unable to produce a single word. The elevator chimed crisply and stopped at the 12th floor. The first to emerge were 2 uniformed NYPD officers with serious expressions, followed by a middle-aged man in a business suit carrying a briefcase and walking with urgent steps. This was my attorney, David Chen, demonstrating remarkable efficiency. Who reported illegal trespassing here earlier? The senior officer surveyed the scene, his gaze settling on me and the Elizabeth mother-daughter pair blocking the doorway. I immediately stepped forward, my tone clear and calm. Officer, I made that report. I am Catherine Brooks, the lawful property owner of apartment 12B. I displayed my phone, again showing the County Property Inquiry System results. This is the property ownership information I just verified. Due to work obligations, I spent 3 years in London and returned to New York today, only to discover that my front door lock had been changed. These 2 individuals, I indicated Elizabeth and Vanessa, my aunt and cousin, have unlawfully occupied my residence, claimed the apartment has been transferred to them, and are refusing to allow me entry." Attorney David stepped forward appropriately, presenting his business card and prepared property certification documents. "Officers, I am David Chen, legal counsel for Catherine Brooks. These are copies of the property deed and Catherine's identification. The ownership is clear and undisputed. The current situation represents typical illegal occupation, and my client's lawful rights have been severely violated." The officers carefully examined the documents, compared them with my identification, then turned to the ashen-faced Elizabeth. "You two, what is going on here? Please explain." Elizabeth seemed to grasp at this as a lifeline, rushing forward with tears in her voice, attempting to grab the officer's arm. "Officer, this is all a misunderstanding. A complete misunderstanding. We are relatives. This is my niece's home. We are not bad people. Her parents agreed to let us stay here temporarily." "Temporarily?" I interrupted her performance with a cold laugh. "Does temporary residence require changing the owner's door lock? Would temporary residents confidently claim the apartment has been transferred to them? Would temporary residents wear my nightgowns, use my skincare products, and turn my home into a complete mess?" I stepped aside, allowing the officers to observe the chaos and incompatible decorations visible inside the apartment. Vanessa shrieked, "Catherine, you are making false accusations. This apartment belongs to my mother." "Vanessa, shut up!" Elizabeth sharply silenced her daughter. Having lived longer, she understood that throwing tantrums before police officers was useless. Instead, she attempted emotional manipulation, producing tears on demand. "Catherine, dear, Aunt was wrong. Aunt did not explain clearly to you. During the 3 years you were abroad, your parents' health was poor, and the apartment was cold and empty. We came with good intentions to help care for them, to keep them company. We changed the lock because the previous keys were lost, and we were worried about security. Look at you, making such a huge commotion as soon as you return, letting all the neighbors see this embarrassing spectacle. Taking care of my parents." I caught the key information in her words, my heart sinking abruptly. However, I maintained my composure outwardly. "Then where are my parents now?" Elizabeth's eyes flickered with uncertainty as she stammered. They thought the city was too noisy, so they went back to the countryside in Westchester, said it was quieter." Back to Westchester? My parents had lived in Manhattan their entire lives. Their friends and social circles were all here. How could they suddenly return to that countryside they had long since grown unaccustomed to? Moreover, how could they possibly not inform me of such a significant decision? Suspicions multiplied, but this was not the time for thorough investigation. I turned to the officers, my tone firm and resolute. "Officer, the property ownership documentation is here. My familial relationship with these 2 women cannot change the fact that they unlawfully entered my residence without my permission. I demand they vacate immediately and restore my lawful possession of the apartment. If they refuse, I will pursue their legal liability." Attorney David added, according to New York Penal Law Section 140.05, unlawful entry into another person's residence, when circumstances are serious, constitutes a felony. Even in less serious circumstances, it violates relevant laws and can result in detention and fines. My client has full rights to demand immediate cessation of interference. Each legal statute struck like heavy blows on Elizabeth and her daughter's hearts. Vanessa shrank backward in fear. Elizabeth's wailing caught in her throat as she realized that the niece before her was no longer the junior family member they could manipulate at will. At that moment, the elevator chimed again. This time, the arrival was a supervisor from the 19th precinct, clearly responding to Captain Murphy's call and rushing to the scene with extremely courteous demeanor. "Ms. Brooks, I presume." Captain Murphy has already provided instructions. We will certainly handle this matter appropriately according to law and protect your lawful rights." He nodded to the officers on scene. With clear directives from superiors, the on-scene officers handled the matter more decisively. They addressed Elizabeth and Vanessa seriously. "Ladies, the property ownership is clear. Your behavior constitutes suspected illegal entry into another person's residence. Please cooperate immediately, gather your personal belongings and leave this location. Otherwise, we will take enforcement action according to law." The words "enforcement action" completely shattered Elizabeth's psychological defenses. Her legs gave way and she actually collapsed to the floor, slapping her thighs while wailing loudly. "There is no justice, no family feeling whatsoever between relatives. We helped watch the apartment with good intentions, and now we are being charged with crimes. Catherine, you heartless creature, you enjoyed yourself in England while we worked so hard caring for your parents." Vanessa joined the crying mother and daughter clinging together, creating a temporarily rather pitiful scene. But my heart remained ice cold, helping to watch the apartment, watching it until you changed locks and occupied it, watching it until you confidently declared it transferred, watching it until you forced my parents to leave. I was tired of their performance and addressed Attorney David and the officers. "Please oversee their packing. I am giving them 30 minutes. They may not take a single item belonging to me. For anything damaged, I will compile a detailed list for compensation." I then stepped aside, took out my phone, and called my father once again. This time, the phone rang for a long while before finally being answered. However, the voice that came through was my mother's, somewhat weak yet urgent. "Catherine, is that you, Catherine? Have you returned to New York?" "Mom!" Hearing my mother's voice, my nose stung with emotion, but I suppressed my feelings and spoke firmly. "It is me. I am back. I am standing right now at the door of the Park Avenue apartment. What exactly is happening here? How did Elizabeth and Vanessa end up living in our home? They are claiming the apartment has been transferred to them. Where are you and Dad? Where are you? Has something terrible happened?" On the other end of the phone, my mother remained silent for several seconds, then I heard suppressed sobbing. "Catherine, I am sorry. Mom did not tell you. Your father, he had a stroke 6 months ago. Although we managed to save him, he has mobility difficulties and needs care. The medical and rehabilitation costs in the city were too expensive, so we thought we would return to the old house in Westchester to live temporarily. Your Aunt Elizabeth said the city offered many opportunities and Vanessa wanted to develop her career here. Since the apartment was empty anyway, she suggested letting them live there temporarily while also helping to watch over the place. Who knew they actually changed the locks, and later would not even let us enter. They claimed your father owed them money previously and was using the house to pay his debt." My mother's fragmented account cut through my heart like a dull knife. Dad had suffered a stroke. Such a serious matter, and they had hidden it from me. And Elizabeth had actually exploited my parents' difficulties and kindness to stage this despicable drama of stealing their nest and taking advantage of their misfortune. Claiming debt payment with property was utterly absurd. My father was a cautious person who would never incur debts requiring property as collateral. Fury churned in my chest, but more prominent was heartache for my parents and self-reproach for my negligence. I took a deep breath, making every effort to keep my voice steady. "Mum, do not be afraid, and do not cry. I have returned, and I will handle everything. You and Dad rest peacefully in Westchester. I will deal with matters here and come see you immediately afterward. Do not worry about the house. I hold the property rights and no one can take them away. Elizabeth and her family will pay the price for their actions." After comforting my mother, I hung up the phone. When I looked again at Elizabeth and her daughter, who were reluctantly packing under police supervision, my expression had become completely ice-cold. 30 minutes later, Elizabeth and Vanessa stood in the hallway with several bulging suitcases, looking thoroughly defeated. They had accumulated many possessions, much of which was clearly acquired later, including several unopened designer handbags. Vanessa had changed out of my silk nightgown, hastily stuffing it into her suitcase, but she still wore makeup that had not been completely removed. Elizabeth glared at me venomously, her expression poisoned with hatred. "Catherine, you are ruthless. We will see about this." I was not interested in wasting words with her and nodded to the locksmith. The professional quickly removed the offensive foreign lock mechanism and installed a new, higher security smart lock. Beep, came the soft sound as I successfully opened my front door using the new key and recorded fingerprint. A wave of mixed odors hit me immediately, combining cheap perfume, takeout food, and some unpleasant staleness. I stepped across the threshold into this home I had been away from for 3 years. Everything visible was in complete disarray. The original modern minimalist decorating style had been ruined by various gaudy decorative items. My carefully selected sofa was covered with incompatible lace coverings stained with suspicious marks. The floor was so dirty, its original color was unrecognizable. The open kitchen countertop was piled high with unwashed dishes, with oil residue that had turned black. My study had been converted into Vanessa's walk-in closet, with walls covered in cheap fast fashion clothing, while my collected books and materials were carelessly stuffed into corner cardboard boxes covered with thick dust. The master bedroom was an even greater disaster area. The vanity was filled with Vanessa's cosmetics, the closet stuffed with the mother and daughter's clothing, and my mother's jewelry box had vanished without trace. This was no longer my home in any recognizable sense. It had become a thoroughly trashed dumping ground. Attorney David followed me inside, and seeing this scene, he frowned disapprovingly. He spoke quietly. "Catherine, we have photographed and documented the scene. Regarding possible property damage and illegal gains during the occupation period, all can be pursued further." I nodded, my gaze sweeping over the pair at the doorway who resembled beaten dogs. Elizabeth Foster, Vanessa Foster. I spoke clearly in the room that had become much more spacious but remained chaotic. "Get out. Remember, this is only the beginning. Every day you lived in my home, everything you used, every bit of damage you caused, I will settle accounts with you clearly. Furthermore, regarding those debts involving my parents, you had better have genuine evidence. Otherwise, slander and false accusation also carry legal consequences." Elizabeth's face contorted and she seemed about to say something, but was stopped by a nearby officer. "Enough, leave quickly and stop bothering people here." The mother and daughter pair were escorted into the elevator by police, thoroughly disheveled. Quiet returned to the hallway. I closed the door, leaning against the cold door panel while surveying this home that was damaged beyond recognition. Exhaustion washed over me like a tide, but stronger was an ice-cold determination. Reclaiming the apartment was only the first step. "Elizabeth, Vanessa, everything you owe me and my parents, I will collect every debt with interest, one by one." This battle was far from finished. As the door closed behind me, temporarily shutting out the external world, the unfamiliar odors in the air and the devastation before my eyes silently testified to the 3 years of wrongful occupation. I had no time to indulge in anger or sadness. The flames of revenge and urgent need to uncover the truth sustained me. I took a deep breath, even the air itself carrying the polluted sense of violation. I opened all windows, letting the cold autumn night wind pour in to dispel those disgusting sweet and rotten mixed odors. Then I pulled out my phone, not for grieving, but to begin work. First, I contacted a highly reputable deep cleaning service company, demanding they immediately dispatch a team for overnight thorough cleaning and disinfection. Price was no object, but I required restoration of the apartment's original appearance and disposal of all items that did not belong to me. The customer service representative initially hesitated upon hearing my requirements and timeline, but immediately agreed to coordinate their best team for arrival within 1 hour after I offered double the service fee. Next, I called the manager of a familiar high-end home furnishing company. I roughly described the situation. The apartment had been illegally occupied, interior soft furnishings might have been replaced or severely damaged, and I needed them to send senior designers and assessors first thing the next morning to evaluate losses to all furniture, curtains, carpets, lighting fixtures, and other permanent or large soft furnishings, while preparing replacement plans. The manager was astounded by what he heard and promised to personally lead the team. Then, I contacted a New York private investigation firm renowned for efficiency and thoroughness. I needed them to begin 2 areas of investigation as quickly as possible. First, detailed investigation of Elizabeth and Vanessa's economic status, work history, and social circles during my 3 years abroad, particularly the sources of funding for large expenditures. Second, and more importantly, discreet inquiry into the detailed circumstances of my father's illness and their forced return to Westchester, as well as the truth behind Elizabeth's claims of debt. Money was no object. I wanted the fastest, most detailed, and completely legal information. After arranging these matters, Attorney David had not yet departed. He had been calmly photographing and recording video evidence from the scene. Seeing me finish my series of phone calls, he approached and handed me a bottle of mineral water he had found in the only seemingly clean corner of the still uncontaminated refrigerator. Catherine, preliminary evidence gathering from the scene is complete. Next, what legal procedures do you plan to pursue? Attorney David inquired. I opened the water bottle and drank some cold water to keep my mind clear. David, if we pursue criminal prosecution for illegal home invasion, what would be the difficulty and timeline? If we pursue civil action, besides demanding their immediate departure, which has been achieved, what other rights can we claim? Attorney David adjusted his glasses and provided professional analysis. The criminal route would require proving the other party refused to leave after being requested to do so, with serious circumstances. Today they left under police intervention, so this point might be difficult to establish as serious circumstances. Moreover, criminal procedures involve long timelines and consume considerable energy. I would recommend focusing on civil litigation, which provides more direct and efficient rights claims. He paused before continuing. In civil litigation, we can make several core demands. First, confirm your property ownership and eliminate interference. This point has been basically achieved. Second, demand compensation for illegal occupancy period usage fees, calculated based on market rental rates for similar properties in the same area. Third, demand compensation for all damage they cause to interior decoration, facilities, and your personal property, which requires professional assessment. Fourth, we can claim emotional distress compensation, though the awarded amount might not be very high, but it represents a statement. Fifth, pursue liability if they engaged in rumors or defamation regarding your parents. Additionally, Attorney David added with sharp eyes, if our investigation reveals that their property occupation involved fabricating debts, coercing your parents, or other possible fraud or coercion elements, we can separately pursue their legal responsibility, potentially even involving criminal liability. I nodded. Attorney David's thinking was clear and aligned perfectly with my own ideas. Good, let us prepare along these lines. I want property usage fees and damage compensation calculated at maximum standards. Also, focus investigation on that debt claim, which has crossed my bottom line. Understood. Attorney David recorded the key points. I will organize evidence as quickly as possible and draft a cease and desist letter to Elizabeth and Vanessa, formally listing our demands. This serves both legal procedure and pressure application purposes. Send it. I spoke decisively. The tone can be strong. Also, help me monitor whether Elizabeth or Vanessa possess any assets that could be subject to execution. I wanted them to understand that occupying others' property carried severe consequences extending far beyond simply being evicted. Shortly after Attorney David departed, the deep cleaning company team arrived. 4 professionally uniformed and equipped cleaners showed surprise upon seeing the interior condition, but their professional standards quickly engaged them in work. Machine humming and faint disinfectant odors began replacing the previous pollution. I did not leave but found a reasonably intact chair and sat in a relatively clean corner of the living room, opening my laptop and connecting to my phone's hotspot. I needed to compile a detailed damage list while my memory remained fresh. Starting from the entryway, the missing Nepalese tapestry, the replaced cheap artwork, scratches on the shoe cabinet. Living room, contaminated sofa, might require complete replacement or deep restoration. Worn flooring, disappeared artistic ornaments, damage to the television cabinet. Kitchen, requiring thorough cleaning, checking for appliance damage. A set of expensive imported dinnerware was missing. Study, books and materials that had been disturbed and discarded, requiring individual verification. Pressure marks and stains on the walnut-wood desk from use as an ordinary clothes rack. Master bedroom, my mother's jewelry box, must be recovered. Closet damage, bedding contamination, my expensive skincare products, used up from the vanity. Guest bedroom, bathrooms. Every area bore traces of rough usage. As I compiled the list, I felt my heart bleeding. This was not merely property damage, but trampling of my past life traces and destruction of my parents' peaceful retirement years. At dawn, the house finally revealed some of its original outline under the cleaning crew's efforts, though it remained empty and chaotic. At least that foreign odor had been driven away. I paid the substantial fee and saw the cleaning team off. Exhaustion engulfed me like a tide, but I had no desire for sleep. I stood in the center of the living room that was renewed, at least superficially, yet still felt strange, placing a video call to my mother. The call connected quickly, showing my mother's haggard but hopeful face on screen, with the familiar old-style room in Westchester in the background. Dad was propped up in bed, somewhat pale but making an effort to smile upon seeing me, his mouth corner still slightly crooked but his eyes clear. "Catherine, how is the house?" Mother asked urgently. I switched the camera to rear-facing, slowly panning across the newly cleaned room. "Mom, Dad, look, I have reclaimed the apartment. Elizabeth and Vanessa have been ordered by police to move out. I changed the locks and had everything thoroughly cleaned." Seeing the familiar furniture outlines on screen, though empty, no longer the chaos from Elizabeth's occupation, tears immediately flowed from my mother's eyes. "Getting it back is good. Getting it back is good. Catherine, you have worked so hard. Your parents are useless, causing you trouble." "Mum, what are you saying?" My nose stung as I forced back emotion. "We children were negligent, letting you suffer. What exactly happened with Dad's illness? What about the debt Elizabeth mentioned? Tell me everything truthfully, no more hiding." Under my questioning, my parents finally revealed the truth in fragments. 6 months earlier, Father had suddenly collapsed during his morning exercise and was diagnosed with cerebral infarction, stroke. Though rescued promptly, he was left with mobility impairments, requiring long-term rehabilitation and careful nursing. Manhattan's medical and rehabilitation costs were enormous, and my parents decided to move back to lower-cost Westchester for recovery, to avoid burdening me. At that time, Elizabeth proactively suggested that since the apartment was empty and her daughter Vanessa wanted to develop her career in the city, she could temporarily stay there while helping to watch the apartment. My parents, considering family relations and thinking having someone watch the house was beneficial, agreed. Initially, everything seemed fine. Elizabeth occasionally visited Westchester with fruit and words of comfort. But 2 months ago, she suddenly changed completely, producing a wrinkled paper claiming my father had borrowed $50,000 from her for business over 10 years earlier, now demanding $200,000 with interest. My father could not remember any such transaction, and the signature on the paper was unclear. However, Elizabeth insisted adamantly, threatening that if the money was not repaid, she would occupy the Park Avenue apartment as debt payment. My parents were both angry and anxious. Father's condition worsened due to this stress. Mother was timid and afraid to tell me, unable to resist Elizabeth's tantrums, and could only endure silently. Elizabeth thus brazenly changed the locks and moved in with Vanessa, completely barring my parents from entry. After hearing my parents' account, I trembled with rage. $50,000, 10 years ago, a vague IOU, $200,000. Occupying property for debt. Elizabeth, you truly calculated well, exploiting my parents' illness and my absence to stage this utterly shameless extortion and blackmail. Dad, Mom, do not worry. I looked directly into the screen, speaking word by word with a voice cold as ice. Leave this matter to me. Elizabeth cannot take the apartment, and she will not get a single penny of that non-existent debt. I will make her repay double for how she treated you. After hanging up, dawn was breaking outside the window. A new day had begun. I watched the rising sun with cold, determined eyes. Elizabeth, Vanessa, your carefree days are over. What follows will be reckoning you cannot bear. I picked up my phone and sent David Chen a text message. David, the legal letter can be sent. Also, add a key litigation demand. Pursue Elizabeth's liability for fabricating debts, coercing my parents, and attempting illegal property occupation. I want her to publicly apologize and compensate my parents for emotional distress. The gears of revenge began accelerating. Morning sunlight streamed through the cleaned floor-to-ceiling windows, falling on the polished but empty flooring. The deep cleaning had been remarkably effective, at least restoring fresh air and removing surface grime. However, the worn edges and corners, replaced decorations, missing items, and the overall sense of wrongness from forced intrusion, followed by hasty removal, continued silently testifying to this occupation. Attorney David's efficiency was extraordinary. Just as I finished a simple takeout breakfast, his email arrived with meticulously worded, thoroughly researched formal legal documents, attached as PDF. The letter, sent in my name, formally addressed Miss Elizabeth Foster and Miss Vanessa Foster, clearly stating the following points. Factual determination. Clearly indicating that without the property owners, my consent, they had unauthorized changed door locks and illegally occupied 780 Park Avenue, apartment 12B for several months, causing serious damage and occupation of the property and interior belongings during this period. Legal characterization. Indicating their actions constituted illegal home invasion and serious violation of my property ownership and residence rights. Core demands. Requiring written apology for illegal occupation, compensation for property usage fees during illegal occupation, calculated according to market rental rates for similar properties in the same area, preliminarily calculated as 6 months with considerable monetary value, compensation for damage to property decoration, facilities, and my personal belongings. Emotional distress compensation, special emphasis, requiring Elizabeth Foster to publicly clarify and apologize to my parents regarding her fabrication of alleged father's debt, ceasing all defamatory behavior or legal liability would be pursued. Final ultimatum. Requiring the other party to contact my attorney within 3 days of receiving this letter to discuss resolution of above matters, with immediate district court litigation and pursuit of corresponding legal liability upon expiration. At the letter's conclusion was the law firm's bright red official seal, carrying the cold, unquestionable authority characteristic of legal documents. Send it, using certified mail and email for dual delivery, ensuring delivery proof is retained. I replied to Attorney David. Understood. Additionally, Catherine, there is preliminary feedback from the private investigator. Attorney David added, Elizabeth and her daughter are currently staying temporarily at a cheap hotel near the Lower East Side. They appear to be experiencing financial difficulties recently. Vanessa has no steady employment and previously worked short-term sales positions at several luxury stores, all terminated due to attitude problems. Elizabeth herself has been unemployed for years, living on unclear income sources and possibly previous assistance from your parents. Regarding the IOU and specific details during your father's illness, they are conducting deeper investigation and will have more detailed reports soon. Good, continue monitoring. I set down my phone, a cold smile playing at my lips. Living in a cheap hotel. It seemed that after 3 years, they had squandered most of their resources, and perhaps this desperate situation prompted them to target my apartment. The legal letter struck the calm surface like a stone, destined to create ripples. However, I had not expected the ripples to come so quickly, and in a manner I had somewhat anticipated yet still found laughable. That afternoon, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice belonged to my uncle-in-law, Jonathan Foster, a usually quiet, somewhat weak man. His tone carried pleading and even a trace of panic. Catherine, this is Uncle Jonathan. We received that legal letter. You see, we are all family. Why escalate to court proceedings? Your Aunt Elizabeth was confused temporarily. Could you sit down and discuss this properly? We could also apologize to your parents. Uncle Jonathan, I interrupted, my voice calm and unwavering. The legal letter states everything clearly. Whether we are family depends not on blood relations, but on how people behave. Elizabeth and Vanessa's actions have exceeded the scope of confusion. If you want to talk, they can contact my attorney directly according to the letter's requirements. As for my parents, they must apologize, no negotiation. Jonathan continued stammering attempts at emotional manipulation, but I hung up directly. I knew this was certainly Elizabeth forcing him to act as mediator, lacking the face to appear herself. Indeed, when soft approaches failed, hard tactics emerged. That evening, my phone began being bombarded by various unknown numbers. Answering brought either silence or verbal abuse, content typically involving ungrateful wretch, bullying poor relatives after getting rich, and similar inflammatory language. Obviously, this was Elizabeth mobilizing her uninformed or equally unreasonable relatives and friends to harass me. I ignored them completely, setting my phone to silence unknown numbers. These crude tactics only proved her desperation and complete lack of alternatives. However, Elizabeth apparently would not stop there. The next day, an even more disgusting development occurred. I received a call from a Columbia University classmate and local media contact with a somewhat strange tone. Catherine, have you gotten into some trouble recently? I saw a quite popular Reddit post naming you specifically, claiming you were wealthy but heartless, returning from London only to evict your homeless aunt and cousin from their apartment, forcing them onto the streets, complete with photos of them crying outside a cheap hotel. The comment section is exploding. My heart sank as I immediately opened my computer to find the post. The anonymous poster used extremely inflammatory content, portraying me as a cold-blooded, bullying rich person, while Elizabeth and Vanessa appeared as pitiful victims seeking family shelter only to be mistreated. The post was poorly written but emotionally charged, accompanied by several photos of Vanessa with red-rimmed eyes outside the hotel, successfully garnering considerable sympathy from uninformed netizens. The comment section contained unbearable abuse and moral judgment. Here it comes. I smiled coldly. Elizabeth was attempting to use public opinion to pressure me, turning black into white and confusing truth with lies. She probably thought I was still that young woman who would worry about reputation and fear online harassment. Unfortunately, she had miscalculated completely. I immediately called both Attorney David and the ABC News contact from yesterday. To Attorney David, did you see that online post? It involves fabricating facts and defamatory insults, violating my reputation rights. Immediately preserve evidence, prepare to send Reddit a legal letter demanding post removal, and pursue the posters, most likely Elizabeth or Vanessa, legal responsibility. To the media contact. Sarah, I remember you said yesterday you were interested in my illegal property occupation story material. The plot has updated now. Not only do the occupiers show no remorse, they are posting online to distort facts and attempting cyber harassment against me. I think this better fits your positioning of focusing on people's lives and clarifying truth. If needed, I can provide all property ownership proof, police records, legal letters, and evidence of their false accusations and defamation. Reporter Sarah Johnson immediately showed interest. There's more to this story. Excellent. This has even greater news value. Catherine, don't worry. Our station emphasizes truth and objectivity above all. We will organize interviews immediately, not only reporting facts, but exposing this malicious use of public opinion and victim-blaming behavior. Hanging up, my strategy was clear. Elizabeth wanted to play public opinion warfare. I would engage completely. Moreover, I intended to completely tear off her mask on larger, more authoritative platforms. Meanwhile, the private investigator sent a second, more detailed report. It confirmed the financial difficulties revealed in Jonathan's phone call while uncovering additional details. Vanessa had frequently visited upscale consumption venues over the past year, purchasing luxury goods at levels far exceeding her short-term employment income. Elizabeth had made multiple inquiries to different relatives about property transfer and inheritance-related legal questions 6 months earlier, precisely after my father's illness began. Most importantly, regarding the alleged IOU, the investigator learned through contact with a neighbor of Elizabeth's that she had once boasted while drunk about a money-making opportunity requiring only getting leverage over my parents' weakness. While this information was not yet direct evidence, it sufficiently outlined Elizabeth's calculated, opportunistic ugliness. I had Attorney David integrate this information as supporting evidence of the other party's fraudulent intentions. On the third day, ABC News interview vehicles appeared outside the Park Avenue apartment building, while also investigating the hotel area where Elizabeth and her daughter were staying based on my information. Reporter Sarah's team first interviewed me. I calmly displayed property deeds, police records, legal letters, and before and after photos of the apartment occupation. Fortunately, I had saved previous home photos on my computer, clearly and systematically presenting the facts. Subsequently, reporters attempted to interview Elizabeth and Vanessa. Facing cameras, Elizabeth initially tried repeating her online narrative, crying about her difficulties and accusing me of heartlessness. However, when reporters presented property ownership proof and sharply questioned her about what right you had to consider the apartment yours, what exactly the IOU situation was, and why you changed locks and occupied without permission, she immediately became incoherent with glaring contradictions, finally becoming angry and attempting to grab the camera before being restrained, creating an extremely embarrassing scene. Vanessa hid behind her mother, avoiding camera contact with shifty eyes, unable to utter a single word. That evening, ABC News ran a detailed report titled, "Property Squatters Turn the Tables, Legal Documents Reveal the Truth." The program objectively presented both sides' claims while using solid evidence chains to completely expose Elizabeth's lies, revealing her attempts to illegally occupy property, followed by victim blaming in broad daylight. Once the program aired, public opinion immediately reversed. The truth behind the inflammatory post was revealed, and netizen anger instantly shifted toward Elizabeth and her daughter, condemning them as shameless, scammers, and wasting public sympathy. Reddit also quickly removed the false post under legal letter pressure. Elizabeth's attempted public opinion offensive not only failed to harm me in the slightest, but backfired completely, causing her to suffer thorough social death. I received a call from my mother, her voice carrying relieved sobbing. "Catherine, we saw it on television. Neighbors all called saying the truth was finally revealed. Your father nodded while watching. Our hearts are finally at peace." Listening to my mother's words, I gazed at Manhattan's brilliant lights outside the window. Round 1, both legal and public opinion victories were mine. But this was not enough. "Elizabeth, your greatest mistake was touching my parents, crossing the bottom line of family affection. The real confrontation was just beginning. Economic compensation was merely an appetizer. What I wanted was for you to pay a deeper price for your greed and viciousness." ABC News's report struck like a resounding slap, not only deflecting the mudslinging Elizabeth and her daughter attempted to throw at me, but also nailing them to the moral pillory. The previously anonymous Reddit post was traced by technical personnel to an IP address highly matching Elizabeth's hotel, becoming ironclad evidence of their fact fabrication and cyber harassment instigation. Online sympathy previously directed toward them instantly transformed into torrential condemnation, with some even beginning to investigate more of their information. This social death pressure was obvious. Jonathan called me again, this time with desperate sobbing in his voice, saying Elizabeth dared not leave her room. Vanessa spent entire days in tears, and even the hotel owner had hinted they were affecting business and should leave soon. He once again begged me to show mercy and spare their family. "Uncle Jonathan," my voice carried no emotional fluctuation. "When Elizabeth changed my home's locks, barred my parents from entry, and fabricated lies attempting to occupy property, did she consider sparing our family? When she distorted facts online, trying to use public opinion to force my compliance, did she consider consequences? Adults must take responsibility for their actions. Apology and compensation are bottom lines, non-negotiable. If they find current circumstances difficult, that represents merely partial interest payment for their previous behavior." Hanging up, I felt no sympathy whatsoever. Tolerating evil constitutes cruelty toward good. Elizabeth and her daughter's current predicament resulted entirely from their own actions. Attorney David's legal procedures progressed steadily, since the other party had made no substantive response within the legal letter's specified time frame, except harassment calls and online defamation. We had formally filed litigation with district court under property rights protection and defamation. Our litigation demands included all compensation items listed in the previous legal letter, plus additional emotional distress compensation for malicious defamation and cyber harassment. Court summons had presumably reached Elizabeth. This meant a lawsuit she absolutely could not win would soon be heard. Awaiting her was a substantial monetary judgment. If she refused compliance, she would be listed as a judgment debtor, making life extremely difficult thereafter. But this still was not enough. Economic punishment would only cause her physical pain. What I wanted was deeper level impact, making her truly feel fear and regret. The opportunity emerged in the private investigator's third report. This report detailed Vanessa's consumption records and social relationships over the past 3 years. One name caught my attention: Tyler Mitchell. One of Vanessa's former boyfriends, a young businessman from good family background. They had dated nearly 1 year, during which Vanessa's luxury consumption reached its peak. However, 6 months ago, Tyler suddenly broke up with Vanessa, reportedly discovering Vanessa was simultaneously involved with multiple men while demanding expensive gifts. The investigator included key information. Tyler remained resentful about Vanessa's deception, having told friends he wanted to teach her a lesson, but apparently lacked concrete leverage. A plan quickly formed in my mind. Through business connections, I eventually contacted Tyler. I revealed few details, only indicating I was Vanessa's cousin experiencing family disputes requiring information about Vanessa's situation, particularly whether she had obtained substantial property through romantic relationships that did not rightfully belong to her. I hinted this information might help him recover losses or clarify certain matters. Tyler showed considerable interest. We arranged to meet at a quiet Upper East Side cafe. Tyler appeared somewhat cynical, but clearly showed disgust when mentioning Vanessa. After I briefly explained Elizabeth and her daughter's occupation of my property and Vanessa's role, omitting specific details, only emphasizing immorality and illegality, Tyler immediately opened up. I knew this woman was bad news, even daring to occupy her relative's apartment, Tyler said angrily. Catherine, honestly, during our relationship, she spent at least $100,000 just from me. Various money requests for bags, jewelry, claiming family illness emergencies. Later, I discovered she was simultaneously dating a guy with a Porsche, using similar excuses. He showed me chat records and transfer receipts on his phone. The amounts were indeed substantial, with some transfer notes quite suggestive like, "For my sweetheart," and "For Vanessa's designer bag," though others were direct transfers without notes. Could these be recovered through legal means? Tyler asked. Looking at those records, I shook my head. Pure gifts during romantic relationships, without clear evidence of loans or conditional gifts based on marriage intentions where marriage did not occur, would be very difficult to recover, especially those with suggestive notes would more likely be considered emotional gifts. Tyler looked disappointed. However, I changed direction. What if the source of these funds was problematic? Tyler was puzzled. What do you mean? I discovered that Vanessa and her mother Elizabeth currently have no stable income sources, yet maintain high consumption lifestyles. Their occupation of my apartment was merely one element. I suspect funds Vanessa obtained from you and other men might involve more serious deception, possibly even crossing legal boundaries like fraud. I spoke slowly, guiding his thinking. Tyler's eyes brightened. Fraud? Naturally, this requires more solid evidence chains. For instance, whether she fabricated facts, like family serious illness, to gain sympathy and property, whether she simultaneously used romantic relationships to obtain money from multiple people, the amounts and nature of these funds. If you are interested, I can introduce my attorney for consultation. Even if formal charges prove difficult, this evidence would be sufficient to cause enormous trouble in civil matters, potentially affecting her credit record. I offered the bait. Tyler was clearly tempted. His resentment toward Vanessa, combined with possible economic recovery hopes, made him immediately express willingness to organize all evidence and contact David Chen. Leaving the cafe, I knew I had created another fatal crack in Elizabeth and her daughter's crumbling defenses. Tyler's betrayal could not only subject Vanessa to economic pursuit, but potentially expose her chaotic private life and deceptive behavior, undoubtedly adding insult to injury. Several days later, attorney David informed me Tyler had formally retained him to pursue litigation regarding substantial property obtained during romantic relationships. Meanwhile, investigators made new discoveries. They tracked Vanessa frequently contacting loan company personnel, apparently seeking substantial borrowing. Seems they are truly desperate, even daring to touch high-interest loans, attorney David said over the phone. I laughed coldly. Let them touch it. Tell the investigator to monitor that loan company's background. If illegal lending or violent collection is involved, preserve the evidence. I wanted Elizabeth and her daughter to understand what desperation felt like, all stemming from their original greed. Meanwhile, I personally returned to Westchester to visit my parents. Seeing me, father's spirits improved markedly, able to walk slowly with a cane for short distances. Mother grasped my hands with tears, this time, tears of comfort. I updated them on latest developments, completely putting their minds at ease. Catherine, enough is enough, after all. Mother still felt some sympathy. Mum. I held her hands firmly. Mercy toward evil people is cruelty toward ourselves. If we do not make them hurt and fear this time, they will attach like leeches again later. You and Dad focus on recovery. I will handle these matters. Returning to Manhattan, I received a call from the apartment building management with somewhat nervous tone. Ms. Brooks, your aunt, Elizabeth Foster, just caused a scene in the lobby, claiming our management was negligent, allowing you to bully their orphans and widows, threatening to expose us to media. Security persuaded her to leave, but she probably will not give up. I replied calmly, thank you for informing me. If she causes more trouble, call police directly. Everything is recorded on surveillance. Hanging up, I knew Elizabeth was desperate. With legal public opinion and economic routes blocked, she could only rely on the lowest level tantrums. But I would give her no opportunities. I called the assistant who had previously helped arrange housekeeping and renovation. Find me 2 reliable temporary security guards to watch my apartment building entrance and underground garage parking space 24 hours in shifts. If they see Elizabeth or Vanessa approaching, no need for contact, immediately record video and notify me and building security. I intended to deny them even the qualification of approaching my front door. Removing fuel from under the pot, I aimed to remove not only their income sources, but all their wishful thinking and escape routes. I wanted them to understand crystal clearly that some boundaries cannot be crossed and some prices cannot be paid. This battle I intended to win completely and thoroughly, making them feel terror from the bottom of their hearts whenever they remembered the name Catherine Brooks for the rest of their lives. The power of deadbeat status began manifesting as Elizabeth and Vanessa's lives deteriorated progressively. From cheap hotels to bed rental youth hostels, finally even crowding into extremely poor conditions shelters in the Bronx. Tyler's lawsuit had been filed, loan company collections grew increasingly aggressive, and they truly experienced complete encirclement. I knew pressure had accumulated to critical point, cornered beasts still fight, and Elizabeth's personality type would never surrender passively. That was a Saturday afternoon. I was checking renovation progress in the refurbished apartment. Workers had just finished their shift, building materials were stacked around, but original appearance was becoming visible. I was confirming details with the foreman when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Elizabeth's voice came through, hoarse and exhausted, yet carrying hysterical viciousness. "Catherine, where are you? Are you at that Park Avenue apartment?" I smiled coldly inwardly while maintaining calm tone. "Do I need to report my whereabouts to you?" "Stop pretending!" Elizabeth shrieked. "I am telling you, do not push people too far. That $800,000 a newspaper apology, forget about it. Push me to desperation and I can do anything. I know your parents returned to the city and I can find out which hospital they are in. Desperate people have nothing to lose, Catherine. You make our lives impossible, and you should not expect peace either." This was naked threat involving my parents, touching my ultimate boundary. My voice instantly froze. "Elizabeth Foster, listen carefully. If you dare touch a hair on my parents' heads, I guarantee you and your daughter's fate will be 100 times worse than now. I am not threatening you, I am stating fact. You can try. Try it, I will." Elizabeth seemed completely insane. "I am heading to your parents' location right now. I will show everyone how this cold-blooded animal forced her own aunt to death." She hung up. I immediately calmed down and acted swiftly. First calling hospital security, then contacting Attorney David and Captain Murphy, finally calling the investigator. Monitor Elizabeth closely, see exactly where she is and what she intends to do. The investigator quickly reported. "Catherine, Elizabeth is not heading toward the hospital. She took subway toward Upper East Side, appears very agitated, holding something in her hand." Indeed, her target remained me. I had workers and foreman leave temporarily, checked my phone's recording function, then waited quietly. Within 20 minutes, frantic door pounding and Elizabeth's curses came from outside. I did not open the door, only recorded evidence. She became increasingly frantic, beginning to kick and ram the door, then a sharp gasoline odor seeped through door cracks. She had actually brought gasoline, intending arson. Just then, elevator doors chimed and Captain Murphy arrived with officers in time. "Stop! Police!" When Elizabeth was subdued, she continued struggling frantically. Gasoline spilled across the floor, the scene shocking. She was criminally detained on multiple charges including premeditated arson and threatening others' safety, this time genuine felony charges. I stood at the doorway watching the police car depart, breathing a long sigh of relief. The final threat had been eliminated. Elizabeth's madness became the last straw crushing herself. Over the following months, events proceeded systematically. Elizabeth was sentenced to imprisonment for multiple charges. Vanessa completely disappeared after her mother's incarceration. Tyler's litigation and loan company debt collection would haunt her like nightmares for a long time. My civil lawsuit achieved complete victory. Though actual compensation was limited, they indeed possessed few assets. The court-mandated public apology appeared in the New York Times, this public humiliation more valuable than any monetary compensation. After my parents' apartment renovation was completed, I brought them home. Seeing the renewed home, Mother's eyes reddened. "We are back. So good to be in our own home." I resumed my career, leveraging London experience to quickly demonstrate excellent performance in my new New York position. Life gradually returned to normal with new friend circles, and Father's recovery continued improving. One evening after work, I returned home to dine with my parents in the living room. Local news played on television, while outside showed this city's brilliant, peaceful lights from thousands of homes. Mother served me food, saying softly, "Catherine, let the past remain past. Our family being well together is better than anything." I nodded, serving Father soup. Yes, it is all past. Indeed, everything had passed. That tempest raised by greed and malice had settled into dust. Home had regained its tranquility and warmth, while life opened new chapters filled with hope. I looked up at my parents' peaceful profiles, at this home regained and increasingly warm. My heart felt crystal clear and calm. This was the ending. Bad people received deserved punishment, while good people regained peace. What I defended was not merely that apartment, but life's dignity, family boundaries, and inviolable justice. And this ending was very good indeed. That's our story for today. We hope you enjoyed this incredible tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more captivating stories like this. And don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you for being here with us. See you next time.